So you may be familiar with the book Sacred Secrets, which was published by Unity back in 2008. It was a bit of a response to the movie The Secret. And I say response because one of the criticisms that the movie received was that it came across to some as teaching that all one had to do in order to manifest all of their heart's desires was to think positive thoughts, or to create a vision board and put it up on your wall. But when it comes to this law of attraction, which is what we're talking about here, there's more to it than that. There are all sorts of other spiritual practices and other action steps that we believe are necessary, to put our thoughts and our visual imaging and so forth into a process of co-creation to bring forth the manifestations that we desire. And so the book is a compilation of 35 essays written by Unity ministers, licensed Unity teachers, other Unity writers and supporters that highlight several spiritual truths and principles, along with providing practical guidance and practices that added to and deepened what was offered by the movie. And I was reading an excerpt from one of those essays recently, written by a longtime Unity minister and leader throughout the movement, Reverend Duke Tufty. Duke is the senior minister and CEO at Unity on the Plaza in Kansas City, Missouri. He's been there for probably nearly 25 years now. He's also served as the chair of the board for Unity Worldwide Ministries. And his essay focused on what Duke felt to be the primary basis for Jesus's entire ministry, the kingdom of heaven. Jesus' teaching that it was accessible to all of us right here, right now, that it was present within each of us. And for Duke, he felt that Jesus reached a level of awareness of that spiritual truth that had such a great impact and greatly enriched his living experience. And so he felt that his goal and his primary objective throughout his ministry was to teach others how to do the same thing, how to have the same kind of enriching experiences. Now, when we look at the Greek origin of the words kingdom and heaven, we find that kingdom means realm, and heaven means a process of rising up to higher levels of happiness and empowerment. And so Duke put forth in his essay one translation of that phrase, kingdom of heaven, one possible translation, but it would be to say that it is a higher realm of awareness within us, characterized by degrees of happiness and empowerment. And the key words for me in that translation of his are by degrees. And I say that because of the way Duke then shifted into the use of scriptural parable to further his thoughts on that power within us that we have to create our kingdoms of heaven right here on this earth. Now, I learned something new about the parables of Jesus, and I don't remember it being taught in seminary. If it was, I just wasn't paying attention. So I'm going to credit Duke with putting this little bit of knowledge into my head. And that is, I never counted the parables, but I found out that there are 30 of them in total. And I also learned that they were placed in the New Testament in a very particular sequence, so that they could be like breadcrumbs or stepping stones on a path. Each one we pick up, or each step we take, leading us on a pathway that would take us into deeper levels of understanding, deeper states of well-being, deeper states of personal and spiritual development and growth and evolution and so forth. Now, Duke offered that not long after Jesus began his ministry, it was just after he had only offered the first 3 of the parables, he had what I would call, what we would call today one of those aha moments. Jesus realized the people weren't catching on to what he was saying. They weren't getting the message. And so in true Jesus style, what did he do? Well, he offered another parable, the 4th one, and he did so in response to this problem that he saw. And it's known as the parable of the sower. And it brings into play those degrees that I mentioned a moment ago. So I'd like to share a bit of that parable with you today. You can find it in 3 of the 4 gospels that are in the Bible. It's in Mark, Matthew, and Luke. I'm reading from Mark's gospel, and so I'm just going to share the first 9 verses of chapter 4. Again, he began to teach beside the sea. Such a very large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat on the sea and sat there, while the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. He began to teach them many things in parables. And in his teaching, he said to them, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly since there was no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seed fell into good soil and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And he said, let anyone with ears to hear listen." Now that story is pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward. There's a farmer and the farmer has some seeds. And with those seeds, he wants to create fields filled with crops. He wants to bring forth the prosperity and the abundance and the success and the happiness and fulfillment that is within his heart's desires. So in our stories today, we're the farmer. But instead of a literal field of crops, we are creating our entire lives. And the seeds in the parable, they represent our potential to do so. All of us have the potential within us, so much more than we can probably begin to imagine. We always have the potential within us to grow, to change, to become more, to do more, to live better, learn more, love more, increase our happiness, deepen and nurture our contentment. The list of potentialities can go on for days. And just as the seeds of our story needed to fall into good soil, our potential springing forth is dependent upon the thoughts that we hold, the words that we then speak, and the actions we ultimately take. Now, we can always find parallels in our lives with those lives, or the lives of those in the characters that are in all the Bible stories. However, just because we can relate to them doesn't mean that we always want to be like them. And I don't think we want to be like the farmer. I mean, let's think about him for a moment. You know, here's this gentleman. He's envisioning this beautiful field of crops that he wants to create, that he wants to manifest and bring forth. It would be so bountiful. It would be his own kingdom of heaven on earth. He not only envisions it, he takes action towards it. But look at the actions. He's walking out to his field and he's losing seed on the path, and the birds are swooping in and eating it before he gets another step forward. And then he's got seed dropping out onto rocks where there's no chance of it taking root. And then he's dropping more seed into the weeds and the thorns that are just going to smother any grain that might have an intention of growing. He finally gets to the field and the good soil. But by that time, 75% of his effort and action has been wasted. And why? Well, we can make some assumptions. He wasn't paying attention. He wasn't focused. And one has to question if he was really committed to what he envisioned, that of bringing forth a field or fields of bountiful crops. The degree to which he might experience happiness and empowerment of his kingdom on earth was only 25%. I think we can do better. I hope we all want to do better. There are so many higher realms of awareness that we can attain as we look at all the various elements of our lives that we live. There are so many experiences of that quote unquote kingdom of heaven on earth that we can create. But today, we're celebrating Earth Day. for this year. And so I'd like to pursue the lessons and some of the messages of the parable of the sower with just one specific element of our lives in mind. And that is how we live on this planet Earth, where we are placing our attention to it, how we care for it, the commitment we have to nurture her sustainability so that heaven has a place to dwell. So let's start with what the parable is trying to help us become aware of, or at least more aware of, so that we can do it more quickly and make any necessary adjustments that we might want to make. And the first thing to try to raise our awareness around is what can happen when we don't set an intention and give it our attention. When we think about our own relationships with our planet, we're easily able to hear, to read, to learn about so much good that we could do for it, so many positive steps that we could take that would serve it and our lives in so many ways. But we don't always set an intention to do so. We don't always make a commitment to the process that would be involved. And so all of the potential that we know exists just goes right past us, just like the seeds being eaten up and carried off by the birds. Another realm of awareness to aspire to is one that would help us to see when there are blocks or resistance in us to what we really want to create. With all that is available to us, as far as how we could care about the earth, have you ever felt some resistance to any of it? I think it's very safe for me to say today that not everybody recycles. Not everybody has a compost at their homes. Not everybody turns off running water when it's not being used, or lights when rooms aren't in use, or not everybody uses LED light bulbs in their homes or their offices, and so many other possible actions. Now, each person is the only person that could answer as to why they do those things or why they don't. The answers can only come from each of us as individuals. But in line with some spiritual teachings about creation and prosperity and abundance and manifestation and the like, we might all be able to begin by looking at things like our outlooks and our attitudes. Are we holding some sort of negative thinking about environmentalism or the ecology? Are we stuck in some old ways of thinking or just habits, and therefore not able to open ourselves to what may be some significant changes to make in our lives? In other words, is our negative or resistant way of being the dominating force in this issue, such that the seeds of potential, the potential ways to care for the planet, can't take root in us, just like some of the seeds of the parable fell onto hard rocks? And thirdly, another dominant force to be aware of, to be on the lookout for, is the mindset or attitudes of others. Think about some of the discussions that we can read about or listen to live on television or wherever about things like pollution and climate change. For every voice who feels they are significant issues that need immediate attention, there are other voices who either don't see them as being a problem or sometimes denying that they exist altogether. So if we believe that there are issues to address and we want to do our part, then we keep a lookout for the time that opposite beliefs or attitudes begin to dominate that process. As we begin to plant the seeds of new ideas and action steps we can take, keep an eye out for anything or anyone whose words or attitudes or actions would start to smother those new thoughts and ideas. Watch for anything or anyone whose purpose is to prevent those thoughts from growing and manifesting forth in the world. Just like what happened to the seeds in the parable that got dumped into weeds and thorns and could not grow. So with these markers of awareness in place, now we can look at the parable to see the positive messages and the potential that that story of the parable of the sower offers to us. Lessons that we can consider using for our own plans of contributing to the safekeeping and the sustainability of Mother Earth. Number one, if we truly want to help, if we truly want to bring forth the very best earth possible to support the heaven we wish to create and experience right here, right now, some would say that we have to commit 100% of our time, our energy, and our focus to it. Now that's the ultimate degree of time and energy and focus. And I know that's a lot to ask. Some can do it, but most likely more cannot. And so let's leave it here. And then y'all, when you leave, you can take it and do what you want with it. But for now, why don't we just commit to some degree that would be at least 26%. Remember, we just want to be better than the farmer, the sower of old, even if it's just by 1% to start. Number two, implement the practice of pattern interrupt. Pattern interrupt is just what it sounds like. If you see a pattern that you don't like, when we see something we don't agree with, something that we know is trying to keep us from our potential, we interrupt it by simply placing our attention back on our intention. Same thing we do in things like meditation and prayer. You know, we set the intention, we're going to sit down, we're going to have some time of prayer and meditation, and pretty soon the thoughts start going off in our heads, or we get distracted by something outside of us. And what do? We become aware of it. We say, well, hello there you are. I'm going to bless you on your way now. And we turn our attention back to our original intention of meditation and prayer. It's the same thing. And number three, we do the best thing we can in order to have our positive work for the earth and its environment, in order to support that. So what we do is we spend time in positive environments of relationships and people, institutions, churches, causes, and the like. We surround ourselves with the kind of energy and interaction that has a positive, lasting, and sustaining impact on our lives. Because it's the very same impact that we want our lives and the way we live them to have on our earth. How beautiful you are, earth, and how sublime. The power is within each of us to add to the beauty of the earth. We are empowered. We are empowered by the divine presence and the powers of spirit that are only one breath, one thought, one idea, one seed of potential away. So perhaps one of the best ways to celebrate Earth Day this year is to make a personal commitment, each of us, to just take one step. Each of us take one step that would shower our personal space on this planet with love, with care, with an awareness of the places where she is hurting and wounded and calling out to us. Jesus said, let anyone who has ears to hear, listen. One person who definitely listened was the poet Khalil Gibran. He wrote beautifully about our planet Earth, and I shared a few of his words just a moment ago. And I'd like to close this lesson today by sharing the entire poem that he wrote, one that he simply titled Earth. Perhaps it will inspire you. Perhaps it will be the seed that your consciousness is waiting to receive and begin to nurture into action. How beautiful you are, Earth, and how sublime. How perfect your obedience to the light, and how noble is your submission to the sun. I've walked over your plains. I've climbed your stony mountains. I've descended into your valleys. I have entered into your caves. On the plains, I discovered your dreams. On the mountains, I've admired your splendid presence. And in the valleys, I've observed your tranquility. In the caves, I have touched your mysteries. We pierce your bosom with swords and spears, and you dress our wounds with oil and balsam. We plant your fields with skulls and bones, and from them you rear cypress and willow trees. We empty our wastes into your bosom, and you fill our threshing floors with wheat sheaves and our wine presses with grapes. We extract your elements to make cannons and bombs, but out of our elements, you create lilies and roses. How patient you are, earth, and how merciful. Are you an atom of dust, raised by the feet of God when he journeyed from the east to the west of the universe? Who are you, earth? What are you? You are I, earth. You are my sight and my discernment. You are my knowledge and my dream. You are my hunger and my thirst. You are my sorrow and my joy. You are the beauty in my heart, the everlasting life in my soul. You are I, earth. Had it not been for my being, you would not have been. God bless you.